is going.
Okay. We'll call this budget workshop to order for the city of Holiday Island. It's the 19th, I think, of October. 18th of October. I didn't bring the agenda with me, so. Let's stand and do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh. Now, put the glasses on and try to read this stuff.
Wes, you want to take roll call to make this official?
Okay, yes. I didn't bring Councilmember Dumas.
Here.
Councilmember Graves.
Here.
Councilmember Elwood.
Here.
Councilmember Pittman.
Here.
Councilmember Mills.
Here.
Everyone's present.
All right,
Mr. Mayor?
we have a quorum for the workshop. All right, we only have one agenda item, and that's to discuss our budget for next year. This is just very preliminary discussions. We don't really need to approve the budget until November or December. So I did not distribute, I did not bring copies. So I hope everybody either has their own copies or they got them online somewhere. I'm going to start out with the street fund. Based on our most recent financial statements, it looked like we would end up this year with a balance of about $182,000 or $183,000 in the street fund. That makes two assumptions. That's after we take out the $44,000 that we're scheduled to pay the city at this year, and it assumes that we get the full year's county, our share of the 3 mil county property tax for roads. The status of that is that Justin has been unable to get anyone from the county to return his calls. And even though, he sent the letter probably about 3 weeks ago now, stating our position, making them aware of the Attorney General's opinion. We thought that we had concurrence from the county that they were in agreement. However, it's been pretty quiet ever since that. We have not received any funds, and so Justin was going to follow up with Tony Rogers to try to get a status. Tony has not returned his calls for whatever reason. I have tried to make contact with 2 different JPs, and I don't know if Jack is around. He may not even be around, but I left a message for Jack. He hasn't returned my call. And I talked to Chuck Smith and
Chuck Olson.
Chuck Olson. I knew that didn't sound right. Chuck Olson, and he said he was going over there last week, so he would check and get back with me, but he has not gotten back with me yet. So it's still up in the air yet as to whether or not the county feels like they owe us that money. But we're still going to pursue it.
Is there a possibility of filing some kind of writ of mandamus to compel
Well,
them to do it?
that, Justin and I have talked about that. It wouldn't be a writ of mandamus or mandamus. Justin had another legal term that he said we would pursue, but we certainly didn't want to take it to that point if we could get a response. So, but
And your assumption would be how many months of that county money?
well, they collect the money from March till October, so
That's what you were.
the end of this month they're done collecting the tax money. So
but they will be collecting delinquent taxes and,
all the way through December.
mhm.
What about that one email you got back from her, Wes, where she said, you know, we will make sure you get all you got coming to you. I mean, that, they pretty much indicated at that point that they acknowledged, responsibility, and then,
Well, I think that the exact words they used was that we would get everything that they feel we are due.
Yeah,
That's a little
That's a
different.
big difference.
yeah,
That doesn't mean,
depends on how you interpret it.
yeah,
well, I mean, it's quite evident they're stonewalling us, so,
yeah, well,
I mean, I think it's time to get on
I,
and lower the hammer.
you know, I talked, the last time I talked to Justin last Friday, I
Is
told
there-
him that we needed to make a decision which way we're gonna go by tomorrow night's city council meeting.
They,
So hopefully,
they've done that all along with the district.
Well, this is a matter of law, not fact, so there's no jury or anything. It could be some kind of directed
Well,
motion.
no, but if we don't press the issue,
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying it doesn't need to be a full-blown.
Does the quorum court meet once a month, or how often do they meet?
Once a month.
once a month, third Friday of a month, I think it is. That would be fun to walk in there on that, that's gonna get you.
Well, I was gonna suggest the mayor go.
at
We're
this
gonna throw the
point,
mayor in?
at this point, I would prefer to still let our attorney handle it, because if it is going to end up being a legal matter, then it's best to, let the attorneys handle it. So, now how that impacts this budget here, if you look at the, first of all, let me say that the whole budget is tied into that $300,000 grant project. The, timing on that is very unclear. I mean, it maybe to the point of being difficult or impossible to nail down. The committee that awards the grants meets in February. And so I would expect to hear in February that we were awarded the grant. After that, it's up to the Department of Transportation basically to execute the project. They would have to, you know, finalize their engineering specs, put together a bid package, go out for bids, open the bids, select the contractor, determine a start date of actual construction. At some point before the construction starts, the city has to turn over to the state 100% of our match, which would be $250,000, give or take. You know, the give or take depends on what the actual bid comes in at as compared to the state's estimate. For budget purposes, I put that payment in there for June. And you can see by the ending balance of the account, based on our anticipated revenue between now and that point, we would still have a surplus or a balance in the account of $71,000 after paying our $250,000 to the state. However, if we're still in, you know, discussion with the county and we don't have that $84,000, then, you know, we would be in the hole at that point a little bit. We could probably take money out of the general fund, transfer it to the street fund, and,
Well, we would, because, well, yeah,
you can't take money from the street fund and put it in the general fund. But I don't know of any restriction that would prevent us from taking 15 or 20,000 from the general fund and putting it in the street fund, at least temporarily, until until the revenue catches up with the project. I'm still optimistic that
Well,
the county is gonna come
I
up
don't
with.
think they can, ignore, next year. They,
Well, yeah,
I
they
mean,
can't ignore us this year.
well, I know, but their whole premise is on ignoring it this year is that it was because we weren't a city when it was assessed.
Then, the first response that I got from the tax collector, who apparently tells the treasurer what to distribute, she said, well, we're collecting 2020 taxes now,
Right.
and you weren't a city.
Right. So I don't think there's any, problem with assuming that we will get it in 22.
No, but we need the 84,000 from this year in order to, make sure that we have the grant money covered, the grant project covered next year. Unless it happens after June. If it happens after June,
Well,
we're
you haven't got
okay
any of,
either way.
you haven't put any of the 2021 county in any of these figures.
Yes, it is. It's carried forward.
It is in the carried forward?
Yeah, it's in the 180, well, there's a, beginning balance of 182,000.
182.
That includes the 84,000 from the county.
Well, we didn't spend anything out of there all year. I would have thought we would have that much.
We're gonna spend 44,000.
I don't think we ought to do that.
Well, it's budgeted and it's anticipated. We can't just decide not to do it now.
I don't know why not. We didn't get the funds from the county.
No,
What
the
was
money
that-
is there.
What was that gonna be spent on?
It's a commitment we made in the budget at last year's budget
To
time
give
Right.
HICID? Or,
that we were gonna give HICID 44,000.
We didn't give them an interlocal agreement on that.
No, but we're gonna be good to our word. That's
I
what they
didn't
put,
know. I
that's what
wouldn't
they
do
put
it.
in their budget, so.
I assume they're probably not getting money from the county now.
They didn't get anything from the county this year. Okay, so going to the general fund budget. Based on Wes's most recent, financial statements, it looked like we would have an ending balance this year in the general fund of about 112,000. Anytime I say something incorrect, you're more than
Okay.
welcome to interrupt. But, I am going to recommend at the end of the year that we take 50,000 of that and start building a reserve account. Because, the city does need to have some kind of reserves. So if we take 50,000 out of the ending balance, put it in a restricted reserve fund, that would leave us about $62,000 in the, in the fund for starting out the year. And on the revenue column, I highlighted, I hope that you have the copies where I highlighted in green and yellow what I expected, or what I thought was pretty solid, what I thought was, pretty, a good estimate, and then what we need to discuss. But based on what we've been getting for sales tax and things like that, it would look like, and I'm gonna have a hard time reading this, it would look like we would have annual revenue of,
242.59.
$242,000. and, under, the county sales tax, and then under the Arkansas municipal aid, about, what's that number? I should-
Well, it would be about 35,000, because in essence, it would be the 30,685 in municipal aid, and then this budget stabilization of 4,195 was really an advance payment of municipal aid for the next 12 months. And then it's 1/12 of it is being subtracted from every monthly distribution of municipal aid now going forward. So in essence, we got the 4195, and it's being subtracted then from our monthly distributions of municipal aid. So the total that we're getting is 30,685 plus 4,195.
Okay,
And if they wouldn't have made that advanced distribution, then it's my understanding is we'd just be getting $400 a month more from the municipal aid, because they wouldn't be subtracting the repayment of this advance payment.
okay. So the 4195 that I show is yellow, because I didn't know if that was guaranteed or pretty well guaranteed or not. You're saying is a pretty good number that we can pretty much count on that.
The way I look at it, yes.
Okay. And then, the 2507 in property tax relief, you know, we haven't seen any payments yet in, for property tax relief, so I thought that that one was, you know, till we actually see a check someday. I don't know how good that
In
number is.
the past, when I was analyzing past budgets, when we were working on the incorporation, I think there had always been that distribution in December.
Okay. So, I mean, we're gonna leave it in the budget for now, and, you know, come December, we'll see how rock solid that number is. It's not a huge amount of money, but, then under, fines and fees, originally when I started, you know, trying to put a draft budget together, I did put revenue in there for fines and fees. The more we started looking at this district court, the more it seemed like I was just totally guessing. Because there's no database that we can look at that says that Holiday Island has a history of generating this much every month in fines and fees based on what the tickets that the deputy writes. And I'm still not sure where all that money goes. You know, when somebody pays $125 traffic ticket plus court costs, I've heard that the state takes the first $75 of any fine, because the state pays half of the district judge's salary. And I suppose that that's how they justify keeping that much money, although the municipal league would maintain that the state is collecting far more in fines and fees than what they're paying back to the cities to operate their district courts. And there's going to be some action taken at some point by the cities, you know, that the state can't use, you know, traffic tickets as a source of revenue for other state, you know, whatever they do with it. So, but until all of that clears up, I have no idea.
I tried to get into the Eureka Springs financials, and they didn't show any money from fines. I couldn't find it that would.
Now, I think after our visit to Cherokee Village, I got a copy of their budget.
I've got a copy.
And when I have looked at that, they had an income item in the general fund for fines and fees and court costs.
Yeah, I think the city can use that money in the general fund and then pay their district court costs out of the general fund.
I don't have any problem.
But I don't know what's left after the state takes their part and
I think
stuff like that.
feeling our way through it, I think is a good idea. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be that big of a.
Yeah, if we end up with some revenue, that's just a plus to the budget. Permits is basically going to be building permits and any other kind of licensing or anything that we would come up with. I gotta get some clarification from Mickey. You know, they do have a history of what they have been collecting and building permits, and so far the buildings code that I've been putting together, that I've been working on, pretty much mirrors the current planning commission's fee schedule. So, I can probably get a better number on that as far as what they've been collecting. But we're probably gonna wanna use like a, 3 or 5 year average or something like that, because last year may have been an anomaly as far as, new construction.
So when they charge building fee, that's for new construction, or are they charging for remodeling?
They have fees for everything.
Okay.
Yeah, both.
If you wanna expand your deck, I think it's $100
I thought I can't remember, I just did it and I can't remember what it wasn't a whole lot, but I thought it was about a quarter, but maybe not.
Yeah,
It's only 100.
there are some things that, if it's totally internal to the house, that they don't get involved in as far as building permits. But, otherwise, pretty much anything on the outside of the house that you do, they want a building permit. So that may be an overstated number as far as, income. However, if it's substantially less than that, then one would have to wonder, how many hours the building inspector is really gonna be working in a year, because that is not an offset to code enforcement. That would be an offset to the building inspector. So when we get down into expenses, well, first of all, anybody got any other ideas about revenue? 50-50 drawings?
Are we gonna get 8.2% in the stock market?
And I think there's probably a law against
There
the
is.
stock market.
I would be conservative like you're being, and then we will be happily surprised if we
Yeah.
get more than that and come up with other things that we feel actually need to be,
Yeah.
get money for.
And
Usually there's more surprises on the expense side than there is on the revenue side.
it's not intended to be critical of my comment, but when I average the Pink and county sales tax, it's only 19.8, but you put a 20,005 in the estimate, so, I know you have to estimate something, so it's close enough.
Well, and probably, I think in my making that calculation, I looked at what we had collected monthly, but excluded April, because that April would have been based on February sales tax
Okay.
collected.
So without April,
And
it's
that
20,007.
that was during the COVID
Sure.
hot time.
And we don't have the November, December spending spree for holidays in here, so that's fine.
All right, under expenses, the ones in green are basically the ones that we're pretty much contractually obligated to spend. I don't see that going up nor down.
I might comment, the one for auditor, there is nothing in there. as I had thought, and I have now been told also, is that if we have legislative audit do our annual audit, there is no fee. If we hire a CPA to do it, then we would pay the CPA.
Let's go with the free one.
When we did that, online, municipal league, thing, in the spring, I think it was, what did they call it? I ended up with, somehow or another, I ended up in the auditing one, and they said the number one finding they have is the city's overspending their budget. And I don't know whether they're talking about the total, or are they
Or
talking
line
about,
item, yeah.
you know, the one where we projected and filed, is that what they're talking about, or?
What I think I've been told is that it depends on how you present your budget when you approve it. If you present a line item budget, then you need to look at line items. If you only present a total budget, then you just look at the total.
Okay.
And I guess I think our presentation, it just showed the total, our resolution just showed the total budget.
Right, that's
But
what
it was backed up with a spreadsheet,
This,
so.
yeah, version of the spreadsheet.
Dan, as
And the
far as
dues-
the dues, fees, and licenses, did that include the,
That's,
for the NATA thing too, the Northwest Arkansas Tourism, 2,500?
no,
Is that
that's basically,
municipal
that's
league?
basically the municipal league. What is the municipal league bill, you know? Off the top of your head.
I think it's about 3,700 for
We
next
just got
year,
the bill,
for next year.
yeah.
I don't have that long.
And
I think it
then,
was like 700 for the dues and right at 3,000 for the,
For the
legal
legal,
part.
yeah.
so maybe, I don't know of anything else that we would need dues, fees, or license for, so maybe there is enough in there to cover the 500, but in direct answer to your question, I was not thinking of that when I put this in here,
So
so.
I'm
But you
thinking,
said it's 2,500, right?
Yeah.
2,500.
that one.
2,500, well then I know I wasn't thinking about it, so.
Yeah,
So should we make line 25, the dues and
I
licenses
may have put
7,000?
like the 500 in there to the, whatever, the Economic Development Group. I probably, this year, I put that into dues, fees, and license.
I'm gonna make a note here. We'll see when we get done here, what we think we can afford. The legal there, other than district court, is, basically whatever we would pay Justin to do his things. I think that 5,000 is a safe number. We haven't used them very much yet, but, it wouldn't take long to spend 5,000 if we did.
So
need
what
to
do we
something.
do if we get into a situation mid-year, let's say, well, sort of unexpected, and somebody does a Cherokee Village lawsuit on us, for instance, suing us and HICID? How do we pay for that? How do we pay the legal expenses?
Would that go back to the municipal
It's a
league?
municipal league thing.
Municipal league?
They furnish attorneys.
Yeah.
and they pay,
We would, if there's a lawsuit, we pay them $3,000, right? And then they defend it. Now, if we,
We have to pay them 3,000 in this budget though, don't we? I mean, it's not at the time it happens,
that's
is it?
for our share of the dues to be part of that group.
Okay,
I think that would be, I'm thinking an additional payment. If there's a lawsuit.
I don't remember how it works.
I would think it would work kind of like an insurance policy where you pay it regardless and they use other people's money to help fund their own attorney to help us, but
I don't think you can,
I don't know how it works.
I don't think
And
you
I
can
thought
budget.
that $3,000 was set out as a specific item,
You either,
and these dues are based on our population.
right, I think, yeah.
You wanna follow up and double check on that, just to
Do that.
make sure that,
But I don't think you can budget for whether you're gonna get a lawsuit or
But and
Sure you can.
if we would have our attorney
Contingent.
also assist in defending us, that would be additional. We'd have to pay our attorney ourselves.
which is why we needed a reserve, that's why I wanted to set up a reserve right up front. But that is a good question, if, you know, if, is the $3,000 deductible basically, is that in our dues? Are we paying the deductible ahead of time,
no.
or do we,
No.
or is that just for
Yeah,
protection?
Oh, if it's a deductible, yeah, that
It's
would
a
be a different
deductible,
story,
Yeah.
yeah. But I
I can't remember.
think we
That's
need
too
to
long ago
get
that I
this
read
settled
it.
before we go into the
I
budget.
think it's a deductible, so.
No, I mean, I can't remember if they actually, if there was a requirement for that, I mean, I know if you have a settlement, and, you know, if you go into court, you know, somebody files a suit against us and you do a settlement, the municipality pays half, and you have to pay half of the settlement. Because I was on the BOC one, and they had 2 lawsuits settled, and that's how they handled it.
Okay. The rent is basically baked in. The, information technology, that's basically baked in.
And did you get the numbers from Wes over what we're paying today?
I looked at the bills that, for instance, the last bill that I just got, because I was concerned about that. And it, actually, we have, I think, a little bit more, like $20 a month more in the budget than what we got billed this time. Our bill was like the 450 for the IT support, 149 for the disaster recovery, the cloud managed security service 30, the Microsoft 365 20, that must have been $10 for 2 users. So, and we've got the internet and the phone in there, so I think, and the website, so I think we're still okay.
One thing you might wanna consider is if we get another PC for the planning commission, or the, the code enforcer or something like that, we're gonna have, some additional costs.
Down at the bottom is a planning and zoning, he's got 6,000.
Oh, you did put it in there?
There's a number there, but
Okay.
I didn't put it there.
Okay. We just need to consider that.
Yeah. That's line 58.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
on the,
Below the sheriff.
code enforcement, / building inspector, expense, is that person gonna be expected to use his own vehicle, or are we gonna pay mileage to him, or how's that?
I believe I put, that's under the department expense. Of code enforcement,
Okay.
I believe I made an estimate on how many miles he'd have to drive, and he would be using his own vehicle. I think I used the IRS allowance for mileage as a number. I can provide you more detail on that.
No, I just wanted to make sure we didn't have, that we had any there.
I don't know, I think, I still think we ought to try and do that on a contract basis.
That total salary of 41,600, is that what other cities this size are paid?
It's all over the map, from anywhere from 15,000 for part-time to, I think Eureka Springs had the highest paid one of anybody that I saw at like 54,000 or something like that. So, it's kind of an average that I came up with. Now, I did combine the code enforcement officer and the building inspector. At this point, I'm pretty confident that the two together is not more than one full-time job. I don't really see, where, of course, I mean, code enforcement, it all depends on how much you want to do. You can be out there hunting for violations 8 hours a day and racking up, 100,000 miles on a vehicle. Or you can sit in the office and wait for their phone to ring for a complaint to come in or something like that. Or you can prioritize known violations, and that's kind of the approach I would take,
It also depends what we decide the code is gonna be.
True.
And the fines and fees.
I don't think, I think you'd be lucky if you come up with over
Do what?
15 or 20 a year. Once you start cracking down and take action on them, they'll go away.
There's, I've done some driving around, based on complaints calls that I've had and stuff, and there's 3 places I know of right now that are dump sites. I mean, they're residences, but their yard is a dump site, and they need to be addressed. And there's a couple of properties that that would not meet anybody's code or standard for being properly maintained buildings, rotting siding and roofs falling in and things like that probably need to be addressed. If we don't start chasing down, people that might have something in their front yard that, the neighbors don't think belongs there or something like that. I think.
There was a post today about an RV parked on a vacant lot there on Holiday Island Drive.
RV park in a vacant lot on Holiday Island.
Yeah.
There's one in the 50 to 70 block or street number area.
It's almost across from Barbara Coon's house
Yeah,
there.
it's right on the.
I mean, it's a big one too, it's like a 5th wheel.
Oh, that's,
On the
yeah,
We'll have a mobile.
That's been there.
ninth hole, it's on the
that's been
ninth
sitting
hole.
there for 2 or 3 years.
And
Yeah,
they've also had the boat there that they park next to it.
it's a fairly nice house, it's just got an RV next to it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But people are renting it.
Yeah, it's rented.
I think it's a guesstimate, but I really do think once you start enforcing it, you're gonna see a lot of them. There's not gonna be a lot of repeating.
Well, I'll tell you, if we adopt the code, what Dan has put forth for us to review maybe tomorrow, I mean, some of those fines, $100 a day, and each day thereafter, as long as they continue to keep the violation out there, if, you know, until they clean it up, $100 a day can get pretty expensive.
None of those fines ever stand up like that, though, they always get adjusted down. But, to your point, Jerry, I don't think that parking an RV next to your garage is gonna be against the city ordinance. I don't know of
Well, I mean,
How
even the
that
covenants
would-
say you can't put a tin building on your property. Can't build a metal structure. I mean, that's all that a fifth wheel is. I mean, on the main drag coming into town.
well, we could probably regulate that you can't live in it, but we can't, I don't think we can regulate that you can't park it there.
The only, from what I read, the only thing we can regulate is, creating a safety hazard for line of sight. So if someone did that on a corner lot, it would create a line of sight issue around a corner, but other than that, I don't think we can either. It might be in the covenant, but I don't think the city has that authority.
Gotta affect safety, security,
Health and welfare.
yeah, health and welfare. And welfare can be a kind of or the general well-being of the, you know, the taxpayers can be a kind of a big umbrella, but,
I think, you know, we're just guessing, and I.
well, put it this way, I haven't seen it in any municipal code that I've scanned,
No, but I
that you
think
can't park an RV or a boat in your
I
yard.
think we're gonna have,
If they're letting the weeds grow up around it, it might be harboring snakes and pests.
I have had an inquiry from a person who has a rental in another state, a house that's a long-term rental, it's not a vacation
Long-term.
rental, and they got a notice from that state about registering the rental.
Oh,
And said if you do it before the 1st of January, there would not be a charge for this year, but it sounded like there's gonna be annual rental or annual registration fees on rentals.
they may be
And
called
I
a commercial
wondered if
business.
that might be leading to periodic inspections.
Mhm. Right.
That's,
Speaking of rentals, I don't know if you saw the thing on Nextdoor a week or two ago about the big house on Lake Shore, Lakeside. whatever.
Terry Boucher's
Yeah,
mother?
Terry Boucher, picked a fight with his neighbor, but, part of that discussion was kind of disturbing that guy saying that he pays somebody $317 in tax for that, and he insinuated he was paying it to Holiday Island, but he's not. So, I mean, that,
The VRBO side, I think, is charging a sales tax and it's going to Eureka
That could be
Yeah.
it,
because of zip code problem.
and he may not know any better than the challenger.
So Eureka's getting all the VRBO sales tax that's happening in Holiday Island.
how do we remedy that?
We have to fix the zip code problem so that it is primary assigned to Holiday Island, so that retailers know who to send the sales tax to. And you look in the U.S. Postal Service, 72631 is a secondary assignment to the primary of Eureka Springs. And we have to be the primary name. And so all we need to do is petition and see what it's going to take to make us the primary rather than secondary name.
Well, I just popped in my mind the reason, I think that's a reason to get that done, but on the speed test, that when you type in the zip code, it shows your street address is Eureka Springs.
Right.
You can't override that.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, I don't know if a lot of people did that or picked that up.
I tried, but it wouldn't,
It allowed me to do Holiday Island,
yeah, I put in Holiday Island and said, please enter a valid address.
no, that didn't happen on mine, but.
Alright, well, that's a side issue to the budget discussion. If somebody wants to take on, checking with the post office as to how to get that corrected from Sales
I
tax.
don't know, I read something sometime back, where, Womack's office was involved in trying to get, a zip code change
I
for
had contacted.
Tiny Town,
Oh,
and it took them quite a while. I contribute to Womack, I can call them and talk to them and see.
Why don't you?
and if he's got experience with Tiny Town, it'll make it faster for us to get our wish come
Yeah.
true.
And just to finish that conversation, if it gets switched to the primary of Holiday Island, these rentals prices will go down because we have a 0 sales tax. So we'll gain nothing just by
No.
switching it.
No, they
Until
still
we
have, they
put a
still,
sales tax
they
on.
still have to pay the 7% state and county.
Right, but it's not city sales
Yeah,
tax.
no, it'd be just 7% instead of 12
And I think there's a 2% state tax on
rentals.
vacation rentals
Yeah.
too.
On hotel rentals, whatever they call them.
I know we talked about not imposing any taxes or asking, but, I mean, a very easy one to get passed is a hotel motel. I mean,
And any-
residents don't pay that.
And if we call it that, any revenue goes to one of two accounts. It goes to Parks Department or to the Advertising Commission. That's the only place we can spend that revenue. So we can't use it for general fund.
We
for
could
other
spend
things.
that easy.
But it would be nice to have that money to spend. We
Sure.
could Pay our Northwest Arkansas tourism bill, if
Absolutely.
nothing else.
Yeah.
If we have a planning, if we have a commission
And
for
maybe
it.
a little advertising too.
Now, the first step is deciding how much of that we're going to allow in our ordinances,
Yeah.
because, you know, technically, most of those VRBOs probably shouldn't be operating, because they're running a business in a R1 residential. So, that's gonna be a real popular, subject coming up.
And I think that also gets back to this question about having extra security, having a second deputy because of the VRBOs. And there is no resident living in those properties currently, so we are getting no revenue back. As far as state turnback funds,
Right.
county sales tax.
Well, we may indirectly, because if you read the logic that AGIS applies, they count the houses and assume there's a population in them. When they're looking at sections of our city that don't have a complete unit in it, and they divide it up and say it's a partial unit, they're counting houses. So
But
maybe
okay,
indirectly, we are getting a population.
on some maybe.
But I think he's talking about the taxes use the census numbers.
Right, that's what I'm saying, when they did the census estimate, they used that logic when they,
Oh.
if this
I
territory is
see.
split, they say, well, there's 19 houses in the piece that is not, and there's 11 houses in there, and so we
So it's
put a
still an
percentage.
estimate.
Yeah, on those border sections of our community.
They make a reasonable effort
That's-
to find somebody at home
I
there.
don't think that.
But if they can't, then they, like Lynn said, they have this rule that they use.
Maybe that's why our census number went up.
I don't think we got time to do that one this year.
So anyway, from a budgeting standpoint, I'm budgeting $50,782 to cover the total expense of code enforcement and building inspection, which is probably, you know, the bare bones minimum of what we can get away with.
And I just thought, is there any liability insurance that we do carry additionally because we have an employee on the street?
I thought about that, but not from a budget
You mean
perspective.
driving around?
Well, to have liability, you know,
Yeah.
he's an employee, because I participated in a court case where somebody's employee had an accident and they sued not only the guy driving, but the employer.
Yeah.
So,
Good point.
or worse, I mean, the guy has an independent one-car accident.
And,
Well,
well,
this was in Oklahoma and Louisiana, but at newspapers, independent contractor carriers, we required them to have liability insurance. and included that in any mileage we paid them.
Okay.
So that might be a way around that.
And then the vendors that we had in the last company, we required that they named us, or the company, as a co-coverage. So if something happens, what they did, they were covered.
Additional, that's routine, they can
Right.
add that to a VA policy.
Okay.
I thought that I
In
had,
fact, even the marina, you should do that with your boat,
I think about it,
don't they?
contract.
I just had to provide copy of my insurance. I didn't have to name the marina. Didn't have to have it.
Oh, then I'll take the marina off.
Well, that sounds particularly effective if we're gonna be asking them to use their own vehicle and paying them
And
mileage.
we have to, I mean, if they have their own vehicle, we have to make sure, because your personal auto policy isn't gonna cover that type of thing. Vicarious liability obviously is gonna be a
Yeah,
problem.
and we
They can
make
make
our
an additional
carriers
insurance
once a
very
year to
cheap.
provide proof of that they're renewed that insurance.
If they've got a business auto policy, it's real cheap to add
Just to write the certificate.
as an additional insured.
Now, you're talking about independent contractors and things like that. You're talking about us, not having an employee for code enforcement?
Well, no, I was just saying that to address the insurance, you could do that with an employee as well if they're required to use their own car.
Well, we're talking about two different things. If you're talking about an auto thing, or if you're talking about some other type of liability,
I'm talking about,
like a
do we
general.
have additional liability having an employee on the road was my question. And if so, do we
Yeah, you
need to
would.
carry the insurance?
You would, but but as far as, there's gonna be a couple of different, you got an auto exposure, but then you may have some other exposure, however limited, but I thought the other exposure would be more of a general liability thing, and I thought the municipal league, that's part of the coverage that they would give us, not the auto part, but some kind of vicarious liability out of errors and omissions, or physically hurting somebody when they're on the
Could we
thing.
require
Those are two different
To be
exposures.
bonded,
Hmm?
require them to be
Well,
bonded.
I think statutory immunity also comes in.
Yes, that's true too.
And your employees, you know, are statutorily immune, statutorily immune. Because I had the question, I think there is a law that says that elected officials are not employees. So the question came up about myself. And so I talked to Lanny last week, and because it's time to file quarterly payroll tax returns. And I said, well, Lanny, I said, I am an elected official, so, and I've been taking out Social Security tax, but I said, so should I be treated as an employee, or could I be an independent contractor? And first he said, well, there's the one law that says you're not an employee, and 9 others that say that you are, including the IRS.
Welcome to the
And
law.
I said, what about statutory immunity? How would this affect that? And he said it does not.
What you're talking about,
I'm talking about, you know, so he's saying there's no,
but you're talking about an
Difference
error
there
and omission
between-
type thing. We're talking about a physical.
You have an accident.
right, if you have an accident, but what he is saying is, I would interpret then that independent contractors, say, doing certain things, might also have statutory immunity.
Anyway, I just raised it as an issue because I don't see anything on here for insurance other than work comp.
It's a good question though, Wes.
You can darn well bet if one of them has an accident, they're gonna come after the city.
Sure, because we have deeper pockets.
At least they think we do.
I don't
They better check first.
Well, I mean, it's still, you gotta separate those exposures,
Right.
because as far as municipal immunity is extremely strong in Arkansas.
Okay.
But an auto accident is a different type of critter. That's easy to solve, because we just ask them to get a business auto policy and endorse as an additional insurer for whatever.
Do we pay for it though?
No, he pays for it.
The employee or the part-timer?
Well, the person who buys the policy pays for it. it's not very expensive. A business auto policy might be, but an additional insured endorsement is not very expensive.
But why would he get a business insurance policy if he
Because
didn't
he's on
need it
bid.
other than working for us part-time?
Because a personal auto policy isn't gonna cover him if he has an accident in his open course of employment.
Okay,
What if he's not in employment with an independent contractor?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
It's
matter.
still a commercial use of an automobile as opposed to a personal use of an automobile.
okay. I bet a lot of people don't know that, Pat.
They'll find out the hard way.
Yeah, that's usually when people find out those things.
They need to read the policy, which I'm probably the only person that's ever actually done it.
Well,
Sure. So for budgeting, what would we budget if we were to cover that expense for this person?
I have no idea what it would cost.
Okay.
It's gonna depend on all the other factors. I mean, I was
His
in
driving
claims, not
record.
in underwriting,
Okay.
but still, what kind of vehicle he has, how many miles he drives. It's gonna be more than a personal auto policy for the same exposure, but not.
I'd still start out talking to the municipal league.
They do have an auto policy program. I don't know what it costs, because other cities obviously have more exposures than we do.
How much are we budgeting, for mileage? What's the IRS?
That's included in
it
the.
should be 56 cents.
Yeah.
I thought I saw somewhere in there it was, it had 22 cents.
Last I was paid was 34 cents, but it's a couple.
It's more than that.
I think it's like 50 cents,
It's 56.
because,
It was 58 and it went down this year.
Oh, it's going back up though.
I was gonna say, it'll go back up.
I just think we could do it cheaper.
Well, if we can do it cheaper, we'll do it cheaper. We're talking about budgeting, not.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing a guessing game, so,
Well, no, you gotta guess at just about every expense. I mean, so if we spot something that we probably ought to have a line item on, we need to bring it up now.
Well, I would say normally the 56 cents includes insurance,
But that, yeah, that
includes all your auto costs.
Yeah.
Now, if they have to have a business policy or something, maybe at an added cost, we'd have to consider that.
you pay them mileage, you're covering their cost, that's what.
It's been a long time since I've looked at the business out, and they're not, for one vehicle, they're not hugely more expensive than, depending on what you're doing. We're not talking about a truck driver, we're talking about a personal auto being used for temporary, or partially for business use, so it's not a huge exposure compared to, like a semi-truck or something.
well, this
I don't
is-
really know, that's not really what I do.
Yeah,
Did.
I've made a note to check into that here. But there's other things that need to be, defined before we hire an employee. Whether you have one employee or 1,000 employees, you need to have personnel policies that keep you legal and, so that the employee knows where they stand. What's the vacation policy, what's the attendance policy? How do they get sick leave?
I just
Their
happened-
holidays,
I just happened to attend the HR 5-hour course last week.
so you're certified?
Not yet, but, no, they were talking about that kind of stuff. They have pretty much everything canned.
Right.
We can just take it.
Fill the blanks.
We need to have a harassment policy.
Oh, yeah.
If the mayor sexually harassed the employees, how do they complain? And
They call his wife, and it's fixed.
And, I still think buying a house, do it on a contract.
An independent contractor probably would be a better idea, but that doesn't give us absolute immunity from everything, but it makes it
It
easier.
makes it a lot simpler.
It does. I don't disagree with that. It just, can we get that? I mean,
Well, we don't know if we can hire anybody.
that's true too. That's,
Are we
like I
gonna
said,
put
we're
your daughter
budgeting, we're
on
not
retainer?
solving every problem.
Huh?
Are we gonna put your daughter on retainer?
To come up with these policies?
No, to be our go-to person should we have a question.
Oh. Good. Okay, so there's a lot of work to do before we hire somebody, before we specifically hire
When do
somebody.
you think what's the time frame for hiring somebody? First of the year?
Probably.
Find it first.
Yeah, finding somebody first is gonna be the trick. District Court. Well, I gotta refresh my memory on District Court. We're still planning on, being set up as a OJI, not a department of the Third Judicial District. If we were a department of the Third Judicial District, we would have to pay 1/8 of the judge's salary. If we're an OJI, we just have to negotiate an agreement with Eureka Springs that we prorate. We will pay a prorated share of the judge's salary, of Eureka Springs' expense for judge's salary. We will pay a prorated share of the clerk's expense and the courtroom expense. And we will be asking Eureka Springs to provide security during when court's in session. They'll have a city cop there anyway, so doesn't pay for us to try to have the deputy over there. We will have to pay, of course, that prorated share, which is based on the number of cases. And I'm a little unclear as to how that works. Originally, I thought it was the number of cases between Holiday Island and Eureka Springs. In other words, the number of cases going through the Eureka Springs District Court. But in another reading of the law, it seemed like it was a prorated share of all the cases in the Third Judicial District. So I have to get clarification on that. And I did ask Justin to draw up an agreement for us to approve and then take to Butch-Berry and have them seek approval on their end. We will have to have our own prosecuting attorney, and I talked to Tim Weaver, who prosecutes all the cases for Eureka Springs. He was prosecuting the cases for Huntsville as well, but they've gone a different direction, so he's more than eager to work with us on prosecuting our cases for us. He said he charges a small retainer, $100, a small stipend of $100 an hour, and he said that, if we only have, 6 or 10 cases a month, that wouldn't be more than, a couple hours worth a month for him. So a couple $100 a month. So, not really knowing, here again, we're going into this kind of figuring it out as we go. Not knowing what our prorated share of the Eureka Springs District Court cost is going to be. Having a pretty good idea what the prosecuting attorney's cost is going to be, I put in District Court $10,000. It's just a number that I pulled out of the air. It could be a lot less than that, could be more, I don't know.
The other thing though is, it said that that's not payable until February of next year.
Right.
So, but, it would be well to try and include it in the budget anyway.
Well, if it's due in February of next year, we pretty much have to accrue for it, and, you know, so the money is there.
Yeah.
You know, we'll recognize the expense this year and put it in an accrual, right, Wes? So that the money is there next year.
Well,
It's a liability we're incurring in 2022.
Oh, yeah,
So
you
we
should accrue it as
accrue for
an
that
expense.
liability.
I would say normally, if we're just strictly cash receipts, our cash basis, it'll be shown when we pay it.
But we can carry over the 10,000 to 23, right?
We could carry a balance
Okay.
forward,
All right.
and it would have to, then if you pay it in the next year, it's gotta be a budgeted expense
Sure.
when you pay it.
The only thing is, you know, is this should give, you know, as we go along, we should get an idea of where we're gonna end up. Because it should be, but, you know, it should be based on the actual number of cases that we have.
We'll have to talk about,
But, you know, I think what you're talking about probably is what's called encumbrance accounting, and cities normally don't do that. Your cash basis, and you record expenses when you pay them, you don't accrue them.
Well, the only thing is, we wouldn't have enough revenue in, you know, in January of next year to pay that, so it's kind of just like, we're just kind of couching and.
it's a concept I'm not comfortable with, that, we are incurring a liability, and we're gonna end the year without recognizing that liability is hanging out there.
Right. It's not an expense, therefore, you know, it's not
So next year's budget would have 20,000 in it, because we're gonna put
No,
10 that we didn't spend.
No, next year's would be the following.
I'm talking about 24. In 24, it'd have 20,000 instead of 10.
No,
In February, we'd spend
no.
10,000 of it.
Because you wouldn't spend 20.
you're
Oh, I
not-
see what you're saying. We wouldn't spend it until
You
25.
just start over the
You're
next year.
behind.
Okay.
It's a year behind, so.
Okay.
But my problem with doing it that way is that, you know, right now, it may be one line item in one account.
Right.
That we have to remember, we got a bill coming due in February of
10 grand.
$10,000 or something like that. If you accrue for it, you don't have to worry about it, the money is there.
Well,
That's
if you
what I'm
if you
accustomed
put
to.
it in the budget, you're not gonna spend it, so it'll be in the bank. If you put it in there as a budget
Right.
bank. You don't have to put another little pot. You're just, all you're doing is,
If you haven't paid it, the
it's gonna
money
be
is
there.
there.
Yeah,
So, are you saying cities don't have balance sheets? With current assets and current liabilities?
you could accrue it if you wanted to. As a prepaid,
That's pretty weird.
That doesn't sound right. I mean, if you take on a road project, you don't pay for it till the end, you have a liability that you agreed to pay. Just
Yeah.
like this $44,000 is a liability for us. We've agreed to pay it.
Do you have accounts payable?
it's not an account
Normally
payable.
not, no, I don't, you know, it's been 10 years since I've worked on city audits. And there have been some changes, but you know, no, you're just accounting for cash.
If you put it in the budget, and you follow your budget, the money will be there at the end of the year. Even though it's not an expense. There may be some way you could accrue a liability, but you really don't know what it is, so again, you're just guessing.
How about if we write a check every month to an account that's called the district court? So there's a bank account for district court and has cash in it.
We don't need
There would be a reserve.
So that we have the $10,000 in February, Ken.
We will, if you put it in the budget and you follow the budget, it's gonna be there, okay?
I don't disagree with that statement.
But you gotta follow the budget.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
You
don't
can't
want-
just look at your ending balance and say, well, we can afford to overspend on the fire department because
Cause there's $10,000.
we got all that money sitting there.
Right,
And forget about the fact that you got a bill coming due in February. And to me, you know, we have a simple enough budget to probably be able to remember all that. I can't imagine running New York City that way.
well,
or Fayetteville.
We don't have
It'd be real simple, you ask County Town and see what they did, how they took care of it, because they didn't have to pay it until February. I bet you they didn't put it in another little bucket. That's,
Well, if you wanna segregate the cash, you can do that.
Yeah.
Put it in a separate cash account.
but why?
So it's not on the bottom line. So someone doesn't say, you've got an extra 10 grand there, you can buy those park benches. Or you can fix that pothole.
All these other ones, you know, are the same way, all your other accounts are the same way, other than you know you're not gonna pay this one until February. I mean, that's why you use a budget.
I know, you know.
I haven't, you know, and I dealt with these before, you know, people want to set up little pockets and you go nuts with it. I mean, I think you could accrue,
We'll do what other cities do.
you could accrue a liability.
If cities don't accrue for liabilities, then we won't either.
The
It must work.
thing is, you know, your reports say they're on the basis of cash receipts and cash disbursements.
Well,
If you're accruing stuff,
then you're not a cash.
it's no longer cash receipts and cash disbursements.
Yeah, that's right, it's an accrual accounting system, not
But
a
if,
cash accounting.
but a lot of
system.
times if you don't have that money set aside somehow, how do you justify paying the bill in the month of January?
It's in the budget.
It's in your budget for
I
it.
know, it's been appropriated, the expense has been appropriated.
And you got a budget for it for next year too.
But it kind of blows your mind with the theory of cash.
Well, and that's where you get into places in governments and wherever, if they have money at the end of the year, they hurry up and pay bills, figure out what they can spend. If they don't have enough money, wait, pay for it in January.
I seem to remember very recently, maybe it was you that said that cities are supposed to capitalize assets and depreciate them.
Not so, it's just us and people.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm not sure how that gets into their financial statements under new rules.
Because that would be,
Do that.
that's not a cash system.
Municipal accounting, you expense things when you buy it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a business where you buy a truck and you capitalize it and then you depreciate it on a monthly basis.
And I agree, with the exception that I thought I just heard recently somebody say that
The
the
district,
municipal league or somebody was advising that cities are supposed to capitalize. We were talking about, you know, expenses under $5,000 and what's capital and
well, you have
what's
to,
not. I mean, what difference does it make if it's capital, if it's a capital expense, if you're not gonna depreciate it?
Well, they were talking about having an
And the
asset
question
management
is, think
system.
about accounting wise, so if you wanna capitalize it and show it as an asset, then it's not an expense, so then it's not in your expenses.
I don't know, lot
Can't
of,
be both places.
The depreciation expenses, not the,
Yeah,
not the cash flow from
right.
making the expenditure.
I don't know, some governments come up with memo accounting for depreciation, just to show, try to show the true the expense of operating. You know, at the Arsenal, we, the governmental, and they made them come up with a I just say a memo entry for depreciation, so that if you were bidding a contract or something, that would feature in to show whether you were really operating at your cost of operating in relation to a real commercial business.
Well, I could see something like what the district does. Say after we initially get our assets, then you could set up an improvement reserve or capital asset reserve. And if you wanted to depreciate stuff, you could have funded depreciation and transfer and show depreciation as an expense and put an equal amount of money into a reserve account. And then down the road, when you have to replace those assets, then you take the money out of the
I did
reserves.
that. I did that for the district. That's how they got their equipment reserve accounts. And they kind of messed it up as we went along with the original, because they wouldn't buy new equipment because they didn't want to take that hit in the current year. So we set that up where they're depreciating it on a whatever 10-year basis or something like that, and you expensed it, the depreciation of the expense, but it went into a reserve account. So when you bought a new truck, it came out of the reserve account rather than hitting your current operating. So you had a steady, because I went on the board, they looked like a junkyard moving around out there.
Can you find out, can you get like a copy
I'll
of?
see what I can find.
But when they're talking about
I would
capital,
like to see a copy of some town our size, their audited financial statements, just to see exactly how they do things, cause it just,
the other thing you're talking about capitalizing stuff is that's when you have to keep formal accounting records of what property you own. But it's.
yeah, I don't wanna make this any more complicated than it needs to be, but by the same token, in fact, when I was on the Board of Commissioners, I argued that the district worried too much about depreciation, that they should be worried about cash flow. That's really the only thing that makes any difference, is cash flow.
Well,
Because you don't pay any taxes, so you don't have to recognize depreciation as an expense.
the only problem is they would bite the bullet every time when it came to the end of the year, or started getting the budget, and they wanted to buy some, we don't want to put that hit in there, so they wouldn't buy them. And that's what, it worked most of the time.
My comment was gonna be, how complicated do we wanna make this?
No,
I wanna see the money sitting in the bank. If we save $833 a month toward a bill in February, I'd like to see it in an account. So I can see the number. There's a number to cover that expense we're gonna put in February's budget next year. It's already there. We set it aside all year long because we had court cases.
When we get to the point, I can have one of these webinars, and one of the clerks things, a clerk commented that at one time they had 20 bank accounts.
Well, it doesn't have to be a
We
bank
want to
account. It
have
doesn't
20
have to be
bank accounts, and said now they were talking about eliminating.
That's not,
Okay,
you're not
Getting rid of
using
all
your,
of this stuff.
you're not using your
They said now
counting
we're
system.
down to 6.
Right, but it doesn't have to be a bank account to set aside that money, it's just be in a fund, right? On the statement. You transfer it. You make a general journal
Probably does,
entry.
but then you have to go through and figure out how to make entries to get these transfers
Okay,
made,
okay.
It's not necessary.
you know?
That's what, you're not relying on your budget, okay?
Right. The governing document is the budget.
Okay, so what would this budget look like when we don't expect to spend $10,000 in 2022? Zero, right?
Right.
And then next year we'll have the 10,000 on it. But where's the money gonna come from in February next
Well,
year?
If it's in the budget this year
Yeah.
and you don't spend it, that means you got $10,000 more left in your
A
balance.
moment ago, you told me the budget would be zero this year. For 22, because we don't expect to spend
No,
anything in
we've got
22.
$10,000 in there.
That was my question. How do I know that it's gonna be there? Because I didn't spend it? So how does it carry
Right.
forward?
So is there a balance forward at the beginning of the year?
Yeah. Look at this budget.
It's your cash carry.
That would explain it.
We've got 111,967 carried forward from
Okay.
2021,
Okay,
because
All
we
right.
haven't spent.
okay. We just have to remember that 10 grand is set aside for an expense in February. We don't even have the
As
invoice
long
for
as we
it.
budget. Now, if we don't put it in the budget,
Well, then you
Then
put that
it's-
expense in
and spend it
February
right,
of next year.
of 20.
Next year,
Right.
next year when we take the budget, you'll budget $10,000.
Except you're gonna have all kinds of other
Right.
expenses in
Right,
January
No.
and February too.
now, if you don't put that 10,000 in the budget next year and spend it for something else,
right,
then it's not gonna be there.
I understand.
I mean, you
So
won't
it's the
get-
same problem we have looking at this budget. There's $111,000 left in the 22 budget. How come? Nobody knows why. Well, you have to go back to that budget, see where we didn't spend it.
Right.
Right,
Okay,
or we budgeted a surplus, because we figured we needed to have something left.
actually, the beginning balance will be 61.9.
Yeah, maybe the eventual actual accounting system, not my spreadsheet, but the actual accounting spreadsheet will show a carryover balance of $100,000 or $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of just having one carryover number of 111,000,
Sure.
you have all of these carryover numbers that add up to,
Your budget at the end of
$100,000.
the year will show that you had $10,000 left in.
In that account, or that line. If it does that, I'm fine with that.
In district court.
yeah. I think if we put our budget together, or maybe
I
our
don't know.
accounting system together, not just the budget,
Well,
you know, that each
Yeah.
line item, or at least every, it doesn't have to be broke down, and
yeah,
each
you have
department at least has a carryover
Yeah,
balance.
I'm thinking, probably, say with district court, we need to set up the district court as a fund, so it would not be,
Why?
it wouldn't be part of the general fund budget, it would have its own statement. You could have a combined statement with everything thrown together.
You're making it.
But it's just like you can have a fund for the police department, you can have a fund for the fire department, and there'll be a separate statement for each one. We can do it that way.
Why?
And then and then under this system, then you would have a combined statement where everything's added together.
I don't know if it would have to be a fund, it would have to be a department number could work just as well.
It wouldn't.
If you got a line item for
And I'm
district
not
court.
saying it'd have to be a separate bank account.
Right.
It would be a separate
Then
department.
you'd have to bring in.
Department sounds good.
We have not set
Whatever
up
designation you
funds.
call it in the software. just
We
so
haven't
it's
set
budget.
up departments yet.
Funds would equal the bank accounts,
Yeah.
departments could equal the divisions.
I think that's the way to do it. Have department numbers, have all of the primary categories assigned department numbers, and, you know, that department would have a carryover balance, and all those carryover balances would add up to the total carryover.
Just like
I
we
can
had
work that.
departments under you as a mayor, right?
Right, that way we wouldn't be able to look at a number of 111,000 and say, you know, we're rich, let's spend it on this.
Right.
Well, you're gonna have a statement that's gonna show 111,000.
That's fine, but we can see the detail where it came from very easily by looking at a department report.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It'll make the line items much easier to interpret.
And it makes it more accountable, you know, and more visible, more transparent to everybody else. So that if someone says, I can't figure out their budget, well, if they have the department reports, it helps figure out the budget.
And the other thing it would do is, if we get to the end of the year and we decide we wanna do like I'm gonna ask to be done this year, take $50,000 and set it up in a reserve account, you know, if I suggest that next year, you guys would have to say, okay, what department is it gonna come out of? What department has a positive balance and they're not gonna need to carry it over, so we can move it into the reserve account?
You might pull it out of multiple departments.
Yes,
Right.
more than likely you will.
Yeah.
Especially someday when we have department heads.
When we get rich,
We're long and very.
Well,
We won't be
you
here.
know, there'll be one department for administrating. And everything else will have to go into something else.
Alright, so that's my story in district court. And, I hope to have better numbers by the time we actually, finalize the budget and vote on approving the budget. Fire department is, you know, that's the interlocal agreement, so that's locked in. Sheriff's contract, I have 65,400 in there, which sounds like it would be enough for 2 deputies maybe, but it's not. And I'm anticipating that, that we're not gonna get away with, you know, we've been paying $40,000 a year for 1 deputy, the district has. But that was back when the county was keeping all our money. Now the county is, you know, paying us our, you know, our sales tax money, they're paying us our property tax money, or I assume they're going to. They're probably going to want us to cover the full cost of having the deputy out here, which is, salary, vehicle expense, and the fringe benefits for this, not just the deputy's salary, but the fringe benefits, the insurance cost, and the vehicle cost of equipping the vehicle and stuff like that. So that number is my estimate of the full cost of having a deputy. If we were gonna go out and buy a car, and that car would last 5 years and burn X number of gallons of gas and need so many sets of tires and stuff like that.
But it's the cost of one deputy.
Right.
Okay. Because you have a note that says second deputy plus vehicle expense. On my spreadsheet, it says second deputy plus vehicle, I think.
Yeah, second deputy being the HICID providing the first deputy.
Okay, I think it just needs to say sheriff contract for 1.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
my note.
Okay.
Well, where does that stand, Dan? Because, they're collecting that security fee, but they really can't enforce any law. We have to maintain the police department. And if they want to pay for one, but it needs to be under the city umbrella, don't you think?
We're not required to have a police department. The city of the second class is not required to have a police department.
Yeah.
We could just.
Well, no, but we do have to have police protection.
We could appoint a marshal and say that that's good enough. That's all basically the law says you have to elect a marshal. You have to elect a marshal. That's where you start. But then the next thing in the law says, but the city council can vote to appoint the marshal. And then the third option is they can have a police department or a department of public safety. And and when I checked with the municipal league, they said nobody has a marshal. But there are several cities of the second class that have no police department and no contract with the sheriff. They just let the county do the patrolling and they call it good enough. And, you know, if you're, you know, a town like Beaver,
Well, I guess I missed what called their police department, the sheriff's contract. I mean, it looks to me like we're acquiescing to HICID. I mean, if they want to pay for a deputy, it ought to be under our umbrella.
Why couldn't it be a contract between the three parties, HICID, the city, and the sheriff? And all three parties sign off of it, and it specifically says that HICID pays this much, the city pays this much, and the sheriff provides the deputies. It seems like that would work just fine. I think a reason not to have it all under us would be we would have to be taking money from HICID. And I'm not sure we want to do that.
yes, because I think according to the lawsuit settlement,
Kind of what I'm
they
thinking.
they agreed that it was okay for the district to collect a security fee and spend it on security. And it would probably, or it might be, difficult for the district to pay the city that money to go towards a deputy and have us have the whole contract with the county. I see this, if it happens, that the city has one deputy, pays for one deputy, and the district pays for one deputy, I see that as a short-term situation. Because long-term, realistically, we need more than 2 deputies out here.
But you need 5 if you want to provide 24/7.
There are quite a few cities of the second class that have 3, a police department with 3. And,
We're gonna have to do some scrambling to get money to pay for it though.
well, that's why I say that, you know, this is a bridge to another plan. And, we'll have to see where the funds come from for that other plan. But I'm getting, there are a lot more problems out here associated with crime, traffic control, and things like that than there are with code enforcement. I mean, if I had to choose between more deputies and code enforcement, I'd put code enforcement on the back burner. Because that garbage bag in somebody's front yard isn't breaking into a little old lady's house. There was an incident just recently on Facebook where somebody, and I believe that it was, I've heard that at least that it's tied to that rehab place up in the park, that their idea, if one of their clients breaks the rules, they sever ties with that client. And I heard, and I don't have any confirmation of this, that means they just put them out on the street.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean,
And, I don't wanna say that that's where this gentleman came from, because I don't know that. But, there was a gentleman, young man, wandering around up on,
Like up there by Lynn's area.
Yeah.
well, that was a different one.
Around Blue Water, the recent one,
Oh, you,
that's what I recall seeing.
I thought it was more up by the, like 23 up there.
Anyway,
oh.
Yeah, there was
it's
There
two
was
separate
some-
events.
December.
some skinny young guy, wandering up and down the streets, came up on somebody's porch, was looking in their window. They called the cops. But then somehow he ended up back there again, and
Yeah,
they
they-
said, if it happens one more time, they'll take him to jail. But it was one of those things where he hadn't technically broke any laws, and so there wasn't much they could do. But you have that situation, you have the situation up in your neighborhood where there was a similar, young man, obviously under the influence of something, pounding on this lady's window in the middle of the night, and she called the cops and they hauled him off. And, so there's more and more and more of that kind of stuff going
there's
on.
been 3 or 4 posts of people having their catalytic converters stolen,
Yeah.
cars parked in the yard and stuff, in the driveway.
Yeah. So anyway, going forward, we're gonna need more police coverage than less. And, we'll have to figure out how to pay for that. But if the district can hire a deputy for this year yet, for this coming year, and the city can add a deputy, at least we'd have twice the coverage that we have now.
Are you and Danny on the same page with the amount you're both putting in the budgets?
I don't know that Danny has gotten to the point of a budget number yet, but, I wouldn't, I'm not gonna show that number I'm not gonna offer that to the sheriff, Danny and I are supposed to go over there and talk to the sheriff,
Okay.
and we'll see.
Yeah,
what
this
they
is
wanna
just
do.
your early number. I
It
guess.
is my early number, but I think it was when you and I went over there and talked to the sheriff before incorporation even. And it was Sheriff Ross and one of his lieutenants. They had already started talking about it then.
So how will that work, them hiring one, us hiring one?
Don't know that yet. That's why Danny and I have to go over there and talk to them.
It could be one contract.
Well, I'm just going about, when this was first broached at that ambush meeting they made us come to, some of us were told that they're gonna hire a deputy and it's gonna be Aaron and, good luck finding somebody. I didn't have a good feeling about that, still don't, but I trust Dan.
Well, it would be up to the county to hire somebody and to buy another vehicle. And, that's why I think it's gonna be a little more difficult this time around.
Well, I
Because
just
they are
didn't want
gonna have to-
Danny plugging 40,000 or something, whatever they're paying now, 48,000 into his budget if we're thinking it's gonna be higher, and he doesn't know it, so.
Well, Danny and I have talked.
A thought that I had is, have we investigated what it might cost for Eureka to come over and provide police service for us?
No.
Okay.
No. But we do have to have, if we're gonna have district court, we do have to have a police department, which is why Justin drafted the ordinance that we're gonna be discussing tomorrow. Establishing a police department with no employees, and the staffing of the police department will be done through contract with the county.
Oh,
Whether
would
that
it be
be,
the county jail, in other words, sort of? We would use the county jail,
we would,
so to
we
speak?
would have a contract for a deputy, or 2 deputies, or however many deputies, you know, we end up with, but he said that was his suggestion as to how to meet the intent of the law for having a district court.
Do any of the violations that the city would have an ordinance for, are any of those misdemeanors?
It could be.
So you have to get arraigned and you have to go to jail and get photographed and stuff like that when that happens, don't you? Or am I wrong?
I don't know about all of that, but there are some code enforcement citations that could be misdemeanors.
Yeah, I just don't know enough about it, so I
And,
just wondered.
Tying that back into code enforcement, one of the reasons why I backed off on the cost of the code enforcement officer and the building inspector was because originally I was under the impression that the code enforcement officer, in order to be able to write citations, if letters and talking nice to people don't work, and it results in writing a citation, that the code enforcement officer would have to be a sworn officer. And that is true. If he or she is going to write the citation. But in Green Forest, if it comes to that point, then David Orr gets with the police department, and the police write the citation and deliver it. So the code enforcement officer does not have to be a sworn officer, because the deputy can, in fact, write the citation and serve it. So, but again, that would be, if we only had 1 deputy here, that would be one more thing that our 1 deputy would have to do.
Back to Lynn's comment, I could see if we worked with Eureka Springs, they're only 5, 6, 7 miles away. If something comes up, versus 75% of the time when we don't have a deputy on duty, having to bring somebody 30 or 35 miles to get here.
That's something, it would definitely be worth pursuing. I don't think there's time to pursue it for this coming year, but it would definitely be worth pursuing going forward. I really do think that that's how, there's one small city that is basically inside of Little Rock. If you look at the city limits of western Little Rock, landlocked inside of Little Rock, there's a little city. And I don't believe they have a police department. And there's also a little city north, but almost connected to Searcy. And they don't have a police department. And I'm guessing that that's what they do, because they're connected, land-wise. You don't know that you're leaving one city and going into another, other than maybe the street signs change colors. So the bigger city just does all the patrolling.
I would think one of the difficulties we would have working with Eureka Springs handling calls out here, unless they were assigned permanently, particular days or hours or something, it probably wouldn't be any better than using the county, because Eureka Springs crimes happen at night because of all the bars and stuff like that, and the drunks and traffic accidents and what have you, and weekends. And I think nights are our largest problem out here. Just some thoughts.
And I brought up, I think I read someplace they have 18 enforcement officers. So,
can tell you,
It's a big budget.
and this, this is a number that you can choke on. In 2013, Horseshoe Bend had their own police department. And they decided to enter into a contract with the sheriff, I believe it's Izard County down there. They, and I have a copy of their initial contract, the first one they wrote. They gave the county all of their equipment, all of their cars, everything that they had for their police department, and $250,000 for the first year coverage, police protection. And they considered that a bargain. Running the police department was more than a third of their city budget. And of course, down there, they have a municipal recreational improvement district running the amenities, but other than that, the city has everything. So.
And there isn't much there.
No.
It's not to degrade it,
But
but there isn't much there.
population-wise, they're the same size we are.
Yeah.
And they were a suburban improvement district. And, they're a few years ahead of us as far as turning into a city.
I'll tell you, Bella Vista went crazy with their city services and their salaries and everything else. Blows your mind how much they spend.
Well, Cherokee Village had like 6 or 8 full-time,
8, I believe, I was gonna comment, I think it was 8.
8 full-time.
And when I talked one day to, I think the clerk maybe down in Huntsville, or someone down in Huntsville in the city, and they have a huge police department in Huntsville, and their population isn't that much bigger than us.
Yeah. I don't know if being the county seat gives them access to revenue. They do have a Walmart.
There's nothing else. There's no other towns in the county hardly.
There you go, Jerry.
Every city around here
It's
has
a Walmart where.
at least a 3% city sales tax to pay for all that
You
stuff.
bet, that's what does
And
it.
if you have a 3% city sales tax and a Walmart,
You're good.
you're in good shape. Yeah.
But when you see the size of this
We don't
city
think
police
Walmart's at
departments
3%
in
of
these
what we-
smaller towns
Anyway.
sometimes, and you're thinking, oh my God,
I don't know,
how do they do it?
I don't know how they do
But
it
it's
either,
the
but
sales tax that is.
So here again, before we finalize the
Move on.
budget, we need to have the sheriff contract thing nailed down. Until that happens,
When are you supposed to talk with them?
I don't know. Danny and I have to nail that down.
I don't know how they do it, but Hot Spring Village has their own police department, even out with their POA, but all their policemen are deputized by the county, so.
They're county deputies too.
That population down there is like 15 or 20,000 people.
But, so it probably is cheaper than, actually having your own. The only advantage I can see with, if we go with the sheriff, there's some other things that come with the fact that it's their deputies, you got CID type people, you got access to the jail, and you got backup. Whereas if we go by ourselves, you're gonna have.
We have to have at least 24-hour prisoner housing. We have to have dispatch. I mean, it's an expensive proposition.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I'm not sure why every small town doesn't just contract with the county and make sure that you have plenty of deputies to go around. And,
Well, the only problem we have with contracting with the county is, and that's what they did when I was on the board, and we had the 2 deputies. They did not give those people, they did not give the sheriff 2 additional slots, the JPs. They didn't allocate. So they were having to take the two that came out here out of their allocation
Right,
as if they didn't have the contract, and that's not right.
it's not right.
They should, you know,
And if the county adds a deputy for Holiday Island, the JP's quorum court's gonna have to approve that, cause
right, and they won't do it.
They'll have to budget.
Well, if we're paying for all this, they better be people they aren't considering working anywhere else.
I mean, that's a problem that, you know, they went through all the time, staffing. This current sheriff seems to be doing an adequate, you know, again, you know, he has put Aaron out here and he's been here all.
Is he running for reelection?
No.
Different era.
No. I'm
Oh,
talking
you
about
mean
the
the
sheriff.
Sheriff Ross, no, he's not running.
But supposedly his deputy, I mean, his right-hand man is running. But and you get a new sheriff every 2 years, so.
It's 4 now.
And then I put in $6,000 for planning and zoning. I don't really anticipate a lot of expense there, but we may, I don't know.
The biggest expense I see coming is, if we're required to do publications in newspapers about any zoning variance hearings. You know, you have to publish hearings if there's gonna be a subdivision that's reviewed, but it's the variances. If anybody wants to come and have a conditional use permit, everything I've read, it has to be published. And those articles in the Gazette, they're $250 to $400 to do this much printing. Jerry said that he thought maybe those were dictated by some statute because they're some sort of public notice. I haven't dug into that to see. But, you know, $250 for 4 inches to announce a meeting. You're gonna talk about someone wants to vacate a drainage ditch.
But why would we want to put a public notice in the Arkansas Democrat?
That's the paper I'm clipping from. And they're $250 to $400.
Can't we post it on our city board?
I don't know. I don't know what, because the statutes I'm reading says you have to have hearings, 15 days notice, published in a newspaper.
So we
Yeah.
can
But
see.
you also put it in,
Some of
Put it in
it,
the ESI or the Carroll County News.
you put it in the Carroll County News, it's cheaper,
yeah.
$150.
And whoever is requesting the variance, could, we could
Charge them for
charge
it.
them
Hey, that's an idea.
to
And,
pay for it.
and that's one of the statutes or one of the codes I was reading. They have all kinds of requests for that. You know, you want a conditional use, $150. You want this, and I assumed it was to cover publishing.
Good thought.
And then in some of the things I've read, if you want a conditional use, if I want a conditional use permit for my lot, I have to notify the neighboring lots with a letter, certified letter, and in some of them they have to put a sign on those lots that there's going to be a meeting that's going to be held on a certain day. So a sign is $50. They have a sign printed to stick it in the yard. So it depends on how far we go and have to go. I think that'll be our biggest ongoing expense and not knowing how much it is, but some of it's recoverable in our fees.
We'll just have to remember that when we write the ordinance.
Yes, that we have to, if you're gonna apply for a conditional use permit, there's a fee associated. But, you know, as far as putting a tablet, computer in front of, under the fingertips, you know, $800,000 would buy a computer probably. That's the kind of price range I'm looking at. Why do you chuckle? Okay.
Okay, so my notes are, the cost, the computer cost, the cost of having another computer for the building inspector, code enforcement officer.
Because he's gonna have to create records, whether he creates them electronically and saves them, or prints them out and saves them in a file. Records have to be kept.
I don't know if we decided to capitalize those PCs or what you decided on that, but just something out there I'll throw out.
But that's just to buy the hardware, you know, you'll have another license on your 365 and whatever else.
Whatever we're paying monthly, we'll have to add a
Yeah, a bucket for that.
bucket for that too.
And then we need to find out more about the liability insurance for an employee, whether that be auto insurance or liability for anything else they may do wrong or trouble that they might get in.
I mean,
And
if the gun goes off when it's taken out of his holster and shoots himself in the foot, somebody's gotta pay for it.
yeah, somebody said before that
We don't,
Colin Powell died, but so did, who was Barney's girlfriend?
don't give him a gun.
Thelma Lou.
Thelma Lou.
Thelma Lou died.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And then the $2,500 for, what was that? Well, it was for advertising, but what was the specific thing
NATA, N-A-T-A.
in
Dues.
ATA? Okay.
And there was $500 from something else.
That was a fun
I don't know.
one. I wrote that down.
If we get into
Wes
that.
talked about $500 from some sort of advertising, or membership.
Well,
What was that?
the one that we tried,
Oh,
the
the-
cities, the four cities,
The 4-seat or 4-seat,
Oh, the
whatever it is.
economic development. That was it.
economic
Is that
development.
500 for
That's
that?
500.
Economic development.
That was a one-time expense.
Okay,
And that's not annual.
I can't say that there might not be something else that they dream up. I mean, it might be worth putting 500 in or something. It's kind of dormant now because the bank won't let us meet.
Really?
is there any anticipated expense for this grant that Jerry's working on do we have to contribute anything to that plan? I know in the grant, to get the grant written, but going forward,
He stood right there at the last meeting, said it was on his dime, and
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Anything else? I wish we had more money to spend, but
Yeah. When are we gonna revisit this again?
next month for sure, before the November, I suppose we could pick a date right now if you wanted to.
And just for transparency, can we create a line on here that it's called, city sales tax revenue and put zeros in it? And property tax revenue, 0, anything, so in our budget, it shows that we do not have a budget to collect $5 million, and we're not collecting the city sales tax.
And that does remind me that we have to pass an ordinance that says
That's where you said that,
we're
yeah.
not going to levy a property tax. So, who wants to draft that ordinance? Lynn already drafted one that I kept forgetting. Don't everybody volunteer?
You want me to get one, I'll get a copy of one, and all we do is change it to 0.
Yeah,
Should be able to find one from Eureka and
I
Burial.
can find one of many, multitude of places.
Okay, let's see.
Start with Tawnytown, that's the attorney that we use.
Is it sales tax or property tax? Sales.
$5 million property.
I was just looked on Tawnytown's, city website, and damn, it's hard to find anything. I couldn't even find their 2021 budget.
Oh, I'd say if you're looking for their rules, it's their municipal league stuff, or their, muni code for Tawnytown. I haven't looked for a budget on Tawnytown. So I've got a lot of planning stuff from them.
it's hard to find city budgets online. I've had a real tough
I'm
time.
gonna tell you what, the website that Linda put together is, it's a good one. It's a really good one.
People squeal here about transparency, but compared to other other cities and stuff. I mean, we have so much information out there that they don't get anyplace else.
I put a link at Jerry's request on the home page that people can go there and take the survey even. That was a good idea. I didn't know I could do it, but I figured.
Well, we had, we had a big brouhaha. I put it on Holiday Island, Arkansas, and within 10 minutes it had turned into a calling for, we don't need broadband, we need better streets.
Oh, yeah.
Corruption that needs to be a federal and state audit, and somebody go to jail. And anyway, I took it down, or took the let it block the comments.
How about November 9th at 3 o'clock? Another budget workshop.
I'm tired of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know why we need it.
I thought, yeah, I didn't think we had a whole lot more to talk about.
Well, hopefully by then I'll have answers on the district court and the sheriff's contract and,
3 o'clock, you said?
yeah.
Well, we have to approve it on the November meeting.
On November 9th,
Yes.
at 3, that's instead of CPC. According to my
Oh,
phone.
yeah. That would be the CPC meeting, wouldn't it, that Tuesday before?
The second Tuesday of each month, yeah, that'd be our planning commission day.
Oh,
That's
maybe I
at
should
5
put that in
o'clock,
there.
isn't it?
No, we have it at 3,
3?
planning commission.
We'll do this one an hour before, and then we'll get them both out of the same day.
That could work.
Works for me.
I was gonna need a whole hour after.
It ain't gonna take that long to whip through it.
No, I don't think after
Unless
today.
you just sit here and wanna talk about it.
I
You
don't.
wanna get it done, so you can get it done in an
I
hour.
set it at 2 o'clock.
And then the CPC at 3.
That works better.
So it's at 2.
2,
We haven't
City
had
budget.
any issues.
it's a workshop again, right?
Right.
We're not gonna, it's not a formal meeting to approve the budget.
Right.
It has to be approved in a formal meeting.
City budget workshop, 2 o'clock.
We have to have a public hearing on that. We have to have a public hearing on the budget, don't we? Arkansas doesn't require that. Just as long as you post it.
Actually, the city council doesn't have to, I have to present a budget by December 1st. The city council doesn't have to approve it until like February 1st. But that just means that we can't spend any money in January because we won't have an approved budget.
Okay, let's go.
Anything else?
Good.
We're adjourned.